The command cut through the air like a blade, sharp and absolute. The judge's voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to obedience. She pointed directly at the silver-haired man standing in his pressed navy blue uniform. The blue ribbon around his neck cradled the five-pointed star of the Medal of Honor, gleaming softly beneath the courtroom's lights. Her eyes narrowed, her lips forming the words as if they were a punishment in themselves. "Remove it. Now." Gasps rippled silently through the crowded room, though no one dared to speak. The man didn't flinch. His spine, still as straight as it had been decades ago on the parade ground, remained unbent. His pale blue eyes held no challenge, but neither did they hold surrender. He simply stood there, as if the command had been spoken into the wind rather than into his life. To anyone else, it was just a medal, golden metal, a bit of ribbon, weightless against the skin. But to him, it was the echo of jungle rains in Vietnam, the screams of friends who never came home, the crack of gunfire against the wet air. It was the sound of a helicopter pulling away with one more wounded man and leaving others behind. It was the moment he had been told that living would be harder than dying that day. And living was exactly what he had done. His name was Colonel James Hartley, and he had carried this medal not for pride, but for memory. Memory of those whose names were etched into black stone in Washington. Memory of nights where the only warmth came from the man beside you in a muddy foxhole. Memory of promises made to mothers, brothers, wives, promises that not all of them could keep. Hartley had not wanted the ceremony when it was given. He had resisted every photograph, every headline, every banquet. To him, the honor was not his. It was shared with men who could no longer stand to wear it themselves. But the nation had insisted, and so it had been placed on him. And once it was there, he vowed it would never be taken from him. Not by time, not by shame, and certainly not by the order of someone who could never understand its weight. The judge leaned forward, her gavel resting on the bench like a weapon she could wield at any moment. There was no room in her tone for debate. Rules, she said, were rules. Military decorations were not permitted in her court unless specifically authorized. It was a courtroom, she explained, not a parade ground. Around them, uniformed service members shifted uneasily. Some stared at the floor, unwilling to meet Hartley's gaze. Others clenched their jaws, their eyes fixed on the judge with the kind of restrained fury that could shatter silence if it were ever allowed to speak. Hartley's hands remained steady at his sides. His silence was not weakness, it was steel. He would not beg, would not argue, would not strip away the memory of men who had died in places whose names she would never pronounce. The room felt colder for it, the air tight with the tension between authority and dignity. The bailiff moved closer, uncertain but obedient, ready to enforce the order. Hartley's breathing was slow, deliberate. In that pause, the smallest of movements caught the eye. A man in the back row, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored suit, but with the unmistakable bearing of military command. His hand rested lightly on the lapel of his jacket, where a discreet pin gleamed, an eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch. The judge began to repeat her order, her voice louder now, as if volume could disguise the moral wrongness of it. But before she could finish, the man in the suit stepped forward, the click of his shoes on the courtroom floor punctuating each step. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. When he reached Hartley's side, he turned to face the judge. His eyes were calm, but behind them was the weight of decades of service, and the unspoken knowledge that her authority here was smaller than she believed. He spoke only once, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. Hartley's medal was not a piece of decoration. It was a symbol of the highest sacrifice in service to the United States. To order its removal was to disgrace not just the man but the nation. The shift in the room was almost physical. The officers behind Hartley straightened in unison. The bailiff froze mid-step. Even the judge faltered, her eyes flicking toward the man's lapel as recognition dawned. She had seen that eagle before, on the uniforms of generals whose authority reached far beyond the walls of any courtroom. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. The man in the suit stepped closer to the bench, leaning in just enough that the judge alone could hear his final words. Her face drained of color. She reached for her gavel, not to demand the medal's removal, but to announce her own sudden recusal from the case. Hartley did not move until the judge was gone. Then slowly, he turned to the man beside him and offered a nod, an unspoken thank you from one warrior to another. The medal still rested against his chest, warm now, as if the ghosts of his brothers in arms had been standing beside him all along. As they left the courtroom together, the officers in the gallery rose to their feet in silent salute. No orders had been given, none were needed. The respect was instinctive, carved into their bones, unshakable. Hartley's steps were steady, his gaze forward. The battle here had been won without a single shout, only the quiet strength of a man who knew that true honor does not need to raise its voice. Outside, the winter air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of pine from the courthouse lawn. Hartley closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cold bite into his skin, grounding him in the present. Somewhere, far away, a bugle sounded in memory. Some medals are pinned to a uniform, others are carved into the soul, and no one, not even a judge, has the right to take them away.